So first, I would like to confirm, is Crispin Colvin here? Please raise your hand if you are.
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. And from the Chicken Farmers of Ontario, do we have Rob Duggins? Okay, thank you, Rob. And Ed Benjamins, if you're here, yes?
Yes, I am.
Ed. Thank you. And do we have a Chandra Mckinnon? Please, yes, I see Chandra on the screen right there. Excellent. So each group of witnesses will have 7 minutes for their presentation, followed by questioning from the committee. At this point, I'd like to call upon Crispin Colvin. Please state your name for the record, and you may begin.
Thank you. My name is Crispin Colvin, and I am pleased to be here today to speak in support of Bill 156. Farms have come under increasing threat from activists and trespassers who illegally enter property, barns, and buildings. This places the farm family, the livestock, and the trespasser at risk. In some cases, they've seized private property, which in turn threatens the health and safety of the farmer and their property, and their family and their employees and the livestock. These acts of trespass can also cause mental health issues for the farm families who don't know the threat, the level of the threat that they may be under when such invasions occur. They not only threaten the health of livestock and crops, but they are a breach of biosecurity protocols as well. And that can put the entire food system at risk at a time when food security and sustainability are government priorities. We are looking for provisions that can respond to the threats we face on our farms, in our homes, and in our livestock buildings, and to the threat that these people pose to our property and our personal safety. Bill 156 addresses these concerns. But protection needs to be extended beyond the farm, to farm animals at fairs and exhibitions, as well as other events and businesses, such as the horse-drawn carriage trade. The personal space of animals, their owners, and their caretakers must be respected. In 2019 in Iowa, animals had halters cut, setting them loose on the fairgrounds, as well as cutting tail hair on animals, thus disfiguring them. This is why the bill needs to provide protection to animals beyond the farm. Anyone, whether hired under false pretenses or under legitimate employment standards, has a duty to report animal abuse. The report should be immediate. If we see abuse, be it child abuse, elder abuse, or animal abuse, there is a duty of care to report this immediately. Under the PAWS Act, it's an offense to permit animals to be in distress. Activists who engage in undercover investigations and tardy reporting are not interested in animal welfare, but have a specific agenda to end all animal agriculture. The current Trespass to Property Act sets a 6-month limitation from the date the offense occurred to when charges can be filed. Activists break and enter and take videos of a barn and then wait for the 6-month period to pass before publicizing their actions, thus avoiding charges. If the abuse is, as activists claim, why wait to make it known? The length of time prevents a distressed animal from receiving care. By not reporting the abuse immediately, they are aiding and abetting the very abuse they purport to prevent. Bill 156 is not, as some would believe, a gag law. In fact, quite the contrary. Bill 156 proposes to protect farms and families from illegal invasions. We need legislation to protect our farm animals from the risk of disease and undue stress that illegal invasions of our homes and barns causes. The PAWS Act and the Criminal Code of Canada include protections and penalties should abuse be taking place. Officers may enter the place where the animals are kept, including the farms, when concerns are raised about distress. In the case of the supply managed sector, agricultural commodity inspectors also have the authority to enter buildings to ensure compliances with standards of care. Access to buildings and barns is restricted for a number of reasons, and first and foremost, minimize the introduction of disease. This is one of the greatest threats to livestock. Farm staff who are in direct contact with animals do not visit other farms unless they adhere to the strict biosecurity protocols. This includes different clothing and footwear. Simply putting on little booties does not constitute biosecurity. This is why trespass creates a great risk to livestock and the biosecurity of the farm upon which the trespass takes place. To go to another farm and trespass again increases the risk of disease transmission and jeopardizes the health and security of another farm business. Movements between farms and properties can introduce new disease, and that impacts the farm operation. Without observing biosecurity protocols, animal health is at risk, as well as the safety and security of the food supply. Farmed animals become familiar with the people who care for them. Unfamiliar people cause undue stress and possible death. Transparency is another issue. Activists want the right to enter barns, abattoirs, and food processing facilities to ensure that animals are not subjected to abuse. They assume that farmed animals housed in barns and outside of public view are subject to abuse, and this is simply wrong. As stated earlier, biosecurity is taken very seriously by the livestock industry. Simply because you cannot see inside a building does not mean that animals are stressed or in distress, and it doesn't justify breaking and entering and trespassing. When an activist steals an animal from a farm, they take them to a sanctuary. There, the animals are confined, fed, housed, and cared for in an allotted space, the same as when they were on the farm from which they have been taken. So the goal of the activist is to bring an end to livestock agriculture and not animal welfare. We need animals for food
You have
and
1
fiber.
minute left.
Thank you. As a result, it's critical that people have a ready access to and sufficient access to safe, nutritious food. Animal raised on farms uphold the standard of care and they're part of that choice. Livestock agriculture is only one aspect of our food and security and sustainability. And I'll end it there and wrap it up quickly. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll now turn to Chicken Farmers of Ontario. If the witnesses could please state your names for the record, and you may begin. You'll have 7 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the members of the Standing Committee for hearing us. My name is Ed Benjamin, and I am Chair of Chicken Farmers of Ontario today. On behalf of the 1,300 family farms across this province, Chicken Farmers of Ontario strongly supports the Ontario government taking action to address the increasing risk of trespassers on our birds and on our family farms. Successful family farms are a crucial building block to Ontario's communities. Ontario chicken industry supports over 22,000 trusted.
Sorry to interrupt, Mr. Benjamins. I've just paused the time. You seem to be cutting in and out and lagging a little bit. Is your
I apologize for that. It may be my internet connection.
okay?
Chair, and I apologize for that.
That's okay. But before you resume, because I have your time saved here. If the lagging continues, what we might do is ask you to disconnect and possibly dial in and join us by telephone. But let's see how it goes.
And
Please
if
continue.
it continues, I could defer to Mr. Duggins, who would be able to finish this, and he may have a better internet connection than I do here in rural Ontario.
Okay, well, let's see how it goes. Thank you. Please continue.
Thank you, Chair. I know that our farmers. Is it still continuing?
No, it's good.
Okay, thank you. So with those 330 communities across this province in which our family farms operate, we are the premier provider of trusted, family-farmed, safe, high-quality chicken. We support and encourage the passage of Bill 156, the Act 2019, which, if passed, will provide greater protection for farm animals, farmers, and more importantly, our food supply here in Ontario. The proposed legislation provides a balanced approach to protecting our birds, our farms, while still recognizing a citizen's right to protest. Trespassing for any reason, including animal activism, puts the safety and well-being of our birds, businesses, our families, and our employees at risk. Our farms are places of business, but they are also our home. Our farms are where Ontario chicken farmers raise their family and play with their children. Disturbing trends have increased the risk of unwanted trespass, illegally entering people's properties, their barns and buildings, seizing private property, and threatening the health and safety of farmers, their families, employees, and more importantly, the birds in our care. Existing laws have not been strong enough to protect our farms and our homes from the risk of invasion. Ontario chicken farmers expect that the same level of protection that is be afforded to their homes as are enforced for homes in urban and suburban Ontario. Illegal trespassing and stealing private property from any other business wouldn't be acceptable, and it wouldn't go unprosecuted. Ontario chicken farmers are looking for the same consideration to be applied to our business. The new legislation will allow farmers to finally operate their business without the fear of trespassers threatening their family farms, their families, and their way of life without any legal repercussions. I'm going to ask Rob to continue with part of the presentation, if that's okay.
That's fine. Thank you.
Hopefully you can hear me, Chair.
Yes, we can.
Great. Our priority is protecting food security, protecting our farmers, and protecting the health and welfare of our animals. Healthy, safe farms are important for the animals and consumers, as well as the people who live and work there. Our farmer families, live and work on their farms. Ontario chicken farmers follow high standards of animal care. These standards of care include biosecurity protocols designed to protect animals from disease and safeguard Ontario's food supply. Anyone entering barns or farms, handling animals, or moving between barns without following proper biosecurity protocols puts the health of animals, the safety of food, and the livelihoods of farmers at risk. Now, our farmers work closely with veterinarians, nutrition specialists, regulators, and other experts to monitor and maintain the health and safety of all of their animals and their property. CFO strongly supports the regulatory stewardship and leadership role of the Ontario Farm Products Marketing Commission. And through the Responsible Supply Management Framework, CFO, as the regulator, has the ability to regulate and enforce compliance with high standards of animal welfare and food security. Animal welfare is of paramount importance to CFO and our farmer members. Ontario chicken farmers are required to comply with national standards, and 100% of our farmers are in our animal care program and fully certified, and in our on-farm food safety program and fully certified. And to provide verifiable assurance to consumers, all CFO farms are audited annually, and all auditors are third-party certified through the Professional Animal Auditor Certification Organization. Incidents of trespassing jeopardize our farmers' ability to meet strict biosecurity protocols required through these national standards, and they put the health and the safety of our birds in our care at risk.
You have 1 minute left for your presentation.
As well as our food supply at risk. Back to the chair.
All right, thank you very much. We'll now turn to our final witness, Chandra Mckinnon. You have 7 minutes. Please state your name for the record, and you may begin.
Hi, my name is Chandra Mckinnon. I reside in rural Ontario. I'm very disappointed. In the time of the mass uncertainty and in the middle of a pandemic, This government felt this particular bill was a priority over bills such as 191, the Workplace Safety and Insurance Amendment Act, that was brought by Wayne Gates of the NDP. In Ontario, with a population of 14.57 million people as of 2019, the priority appears to be protecting corporate farming interests. This bill is taking precedence over the essential workers and other people in Ontario. To be clear, trespass is a criminal offence under the Criminal Code of Canada, and the Provincial Trespass of Property Act, RSO 1990, applies to both rural and suburban. For further clarity, Bill 156 is a reverse onus bill. The presumption is guilt, and the accused must prove their innocence. It is a known fact that proving a negative is a restrictively high bar. Further, as we are all aware, if an employee reports abuse, they can be punished and accused of being on a farm under false pretenses. Then there's the 2-year limitation period. What happens to biosecurity over a period of 2 years? The bill as drafted violates the Charter of Rights and Freedoms and whistleblower legislation, which is federal. This has been expressed by experts in the field. It was made clear to all parties on the floor of the Legislative Assembly of Ontario, and lay people among the community are aware of this as well. The current government has already wasted multiple millions, possibly billions, of dollars on litigation as a result of poorly drafted legislation, the result of which is my taxes go up. There are 14.57 million people in this province. They're not all farmers, and they have a right to have a protest. In reviewing the data regarding biosecurity failures in Canada, it appears that almost every single incident recorded has been a failure at the agricultural level, not a trespass by the public. Included in that is feed that has animal renderings in it, the import and export of animals. I can state without reservation that biosecurity protocols are not regularly followed in the community that I reside in. Farmers do go from farm to farm in the same gear, even going so far, some of them, as to hide livestock that was banned in Canada due to the fact that it makes the link to mad cow disease. That farmer, Suzanne Atkinson, was convicted in 2015 in the Ontario Court of Justice for hiding scrappy sheep in her dairy barn. In fact, if one took the time to review the leaked coverage from various people that have trespassed, which is aired usually live, not delayed, they usually follow biosecurity protocols better than most farmers in rural Ontario that I live near. I've taken the time to look at the impact of this bill on our legal system. As you are all aware, or you should be, because I sent you all 122 of you, an email months ago, sex offenders are wandering our streets. People who have prohibited firearm offenses, people who have shot and injured others are walking free right now, even after conviction, while the Crown was trying to obtain a dangerous offender designation due to delays in our court system, and yet you want to add this to the court system we have. We can't keep sex offenders against children in jail, but we will prosecute people who give water to pigs. By the way, the court has already proven animal activists don't harm animals. It's not their nature. They also don't harm people. It's not their nature. What are you hiding is a question that's always brought up. Christian Farmers Federation of Ontario wrote a letter to the government, which was copied directly to Ernie Hardman, which I forwarded many months ago to every MPP in Ontario. It was forwarded specifically to Mike Schreiner because that group is in his riding. The organization specifically requested to remove psychological from the definition of distress to an animal and, pay attention, that farms be exempted from the animal fighting prohibition of paws. Farmers want to be permitted to fight dogs? With Bill 156, they will be explicitly permitted to run dog fighting rings as, under Bill 156, the reporter of that offense would be convicted of being there under false pretenses. And yes, the chair received that email. Robert Bailey made comments regarding the liability issues farmer may face if someone became injured on their farm while trespassing. I'm befuddled by the fact that so many MPPs are lawyers, and there's Mag, all of whom should be aware that the Occupiers Liability Act clearly sets out trespassers have no claim. Further, this specific act was amended in 1980, specifically to deal with rural property issues and farmers. Today, Mr. Smith asked a carriage farm operator, when is it appropriate to intimidate people? I would ask the committee the same as it relates to protesters. Laura was clear that she is upset that there are protesters and they make comments to others that they don't like what they do. Laura seemed to recognize Bill 156 impedes protests. She wanted to go so far as to increase the agricultural zones to public streets. Farmers are their own overseeing body, a foxes and hen arrangement, and the code of conduct is not legislated to animals. They have been transported with egregious injuries to the point where a vet has recognized and stated clearly this was a horrendous example of the lack of oversight. The farmer knew of the injuries. They were agent injuries. The vet should have seen them when signing the health certificate. The driver that loaded the animal would have noticed these egregious injuries. But again, there are no laws that protect the livestock or those people if Bill 156 passes. I would like to take this opportunity to point out that I'm also concerned that a lawyer that's represented the dairy farmers of Ontario as a client prior to election is the sitting chair at this meeting.
You have 1 minute left. Thank you.
Thank you. Lastly, Mr. Barrett accused the organization represented by Miranda of lobbying the federal government not to provide funds for PPE to farmers. She was clear. Do not give it to corporate organizations. Give it to the smaller farmers. That was a jab at protesters. It fell flat. If this government intends to pass this bill, the public will fund the charter violation claims. For clarity, you can't disrespect people who are only trying to help animals, and they don't harm you, and you shouldn't have more rights than I do. That's the end.
Thank you very much for your presentation. We'll now begin our round of questioning, and we will begin with the official opposition. You have 8 minutes. Who would like to begin? Please raise your hand. And PP Vanthof, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you to all the presenters. Once again, as has been raised in each of these panels, a wide variety of opinion, and shows how divisive this issue is, both on farm and off farm. My first question I'd like to go to Mr. Benjamin's, and I think it's become apparent that there's actually two bills in this Bill 156. There's the trespassing bill and the anti-whistleblower bill. And they're being, for convenience or for whatever, they're being married together. But in the trespassing bill, the only change that's actually being made is that there's two changes being made. The deterrent is higher because of the fines are higher. And if there is damages, the trespasser might have to pay for those damages. Chandra raised a good point. This all has to go through court. Nothing has changed there. One thing the bill talks about, though, is there is no more funds for policing, so the police aren't going to come any quicker. It talks about how to do a citizen's arrest. Are you prepared for your members and their employees to conduct citizen's arrests with the liability that might?
Happy to respond, Chair. And forgive me if I don't get the order correct, Mr. Vanthof. I'm going to respond to your second question, which is, I believe, are we able to inform our farmers about citizens' arrest and how to do that? And the answer would be that if this legislation is passed and it actually comes into being, and I understand that there have been cuts to different budgets from OMAFRA, et cetera, we would certainly look at how to inform, educate, and lead our farmers through that piece very quickly and in the best time frame possible. So the answer is yes, we would look after that piece and inform our farmers about how to do that. So that would require some education and time, but we would be willing to do that. Your first question, if I could, can I have it repeated? Was there a question there, and is it about the timing, John, or I'm sorry, I didn't quite get it.
And thank you for that direct answer. The first question was more that this is actually two bills. There's a trespass bill and the anti-whistleblower bill. Like they're married together. But getting back to the, and I really appreciate your direct answer regarding informing your members how to do a citizen's arrest. And what about reasonable force? Because what we're concerned, and reasonable force is in the Criminal Code of Canada. And the minister told me, well, you know, it's in the, but I'm not sure that your members, if they are facing a very organized, we heard other deputants say that they provoke farmers, they goad them. What? And you can't answer this, but that's the issue. What's reasonable force? What we're worried about is that the first person going to court will be a farmer having to defend himself against an assault charge, as opposed to an animal activist defending themselves against a trespassing charge. And I would hope your organization takes that very seriously, because that is an issue that is going to come up. The second, getting back, so biosecurity is very important. And no one does that more than you do. But on the second part, where you where you get in under false pretenses. So I'll give you an example. So someone is hired in a processing plant or on your farm. I'm assuming your farm had, like my farm did, we checked references, we did all these things, and we hired the person. A year from that date, the person identifies something. The person could very well go to pause, but it's not addressed. If that person then leaves the farm, and I know you wouldn't do this, Mr. Benjamin, but the farmer could, or the processing plant could, threaten to charge that person under this act. I'm not sure that the public, when this is challenged, that the public will accept that, and that public will look at farming and will say, despite all the work that you have done, and as a farmer, I know the work that's been done to protect your reputation. I'm not sure that the public will accept that. If that same clause was put into our Long-Term Care Act, and it said that, you know what, government inspectors have got this all under control, and if you have an issue, just talk to a government inspector and everything's going to be fine. You know what? When this bill was first proposed, people might have bought that. Right now, I'm not sure people are going to buy that the government inspecting, and I'm not knocking the inspectors. They're doing everything they can. But I'm not sure people's perception of what the government is capable of has changed. And I'm wondering if you, and you don't have to answer this right now, but if your organization has thought about the prospect of losing the second part of this act in a constitutional challenge, and as a result, losing the issue, the trespassing issue. We haven't heard much argument. There will be some people against it.
MPP Vanthof, you have 1 minute left. Oh, can we please unmute him? Thanks.
Is a legit.
Sorry, you're MPP Vanthof, you're muted. Okay, there we go. Nope. It keeps on muting. Okay. I've paused the time here. Let's just make sure MPP Vanthof is unmuted. Okay. Nope. What's going on? Are you clicking anything?
I click, and then the host clicks. I will give you the floor.
I'm still paused on the time here, but I'll let Mr. Benjamin's answer in the 1 minute that's left.
Well, I guess I would offer the opinion that as far as when it comes to hiring people, John, and doing things in a very trusting environment, I would look to whoever we hire. If they're on that farm under false pretense or under some other assumed thing other than working for and looking after my farm and doing that work. I would say that the establishment of trust between that individual and the person hiring them is already broken. And I think that's a bad precedent. And to suggest that that's not relevant, I think it is, because our family farms operate on those principles. So I have thought about it, and I guess we'll deal with it. But I think
Very much.
having that...
That's all the time we have for this round of questions. We'll now turn to the Independent Green Party member, MPP Schreiner. You have 6.5 minutes. You may begin.
Yeah, so I'm going to ask my first question directed to Ed and Rob from the Chicken Farmers of Ontario. But before I do that, I just want to say, Ed, it's good to see you again, and just want to thank you for your donations to so many food banks and charitable organizations that feed hungry our neighbors who may be struggling to access food. And so just thank you for your work in that regard, and just wanted that to be on the record. Following up a little bit on MPP Vantoff's question, one of the concerns I have, and I really ask this as somebody who grew up on a farm, and we raise cattle on our farm, and I've spent most of my pre-political career promoting Ontario food and farmers, either through my businesses or nonprofit marketing organizations, is that we've seen in the United States that when organizations have challenged what's, quote, the ag-gag portion of the bill, and it's oftentimes then gone through the court process. And most of the time, the courts have ruled that as being not unconstitutional. And there's concerns that we'll see a charter challenge here in Ontario. And, you know, who knows how the courts will rule, but it'll be a very contentious, high-profile litigation. That it's actually meant that farmers who are doing great work, and I would argue most farmers are doing great work and treating their animals well, etc. But it ends up, at least the research has shown, damaging the reputation of all farmers, even the farmers who are doing great work. And so I'm just wondering if you're concerned about that and the potential, I guess, unintended consequences this bill might have on the good reputation of Ontario farmers.
So thanks for that, Mike, and thank you for acknowledging our work around the CFO Cares program as well. I appreciate that. The health and safety of our farmers and their families and the employees and the birds in our care is our number one top priority. So when we talk about making sure that as a regulator, we make sure that all our farmers comply with those high standards of animal welfare and the on-farm safety program. So there is zero, and let me emphasize, zero tolerance for animal cruelty on our farms. So I think, you know, when I look at this, and so ag-gag or whistleblowers, stopping them, private citizens, I don't believe, are trained or equipped to collect the evidence that's needed on a suspected violation. So anyone that has a concern about animal welfare on a broiler farm should simply notify CFO or the Ontario Chief Animal Welfare Inspector immediately. And those authorities have the power to investigate suspected animal abuse, collect any relevant evidence, and also to file charges. So those animal welfare inspectors are appropriately trained in animal husbandry and handling, biosecurity protocol, the collection of evidence, and they too adhere to a code of conduct. So this is in no way trying to limit or stop people from coming forward. In any way do I see this as stopping whistleblowers or looking to gag anyone from coming forward. I don't believe that exists.
Okay, so I'm
thank
going to
you for
ask
the question.
Follow up to that, Ed, and I'd actually like Mr. Colvin to jump in and answer this question as well. So it's really to both of you. And partly because Mr. Colvin had talked about the duty to report that an employee has if they do see abuse or inappropriate activities. And so one of the concerns I have is, so I'm a legitimate employee. I was hired. I love working for the farm, we'll say chicken farm in this case. I work there for a year or two. Things are all good. And then, I don't know, something happens maybe, and I see something inappropriate happening. And then I go to report it to the appropriate authorities. The potential exists, at least from what legal scholars have told me under this bill, that you could actually be accused of false pretenses, even if that wasn't your intention ever at all. Like you had no intention whatsoever to do that, but you felt like you were just adhering to the duty to report. But then you get sort of accused under this bill. So are you concerned about that in any way? So yeah, Mr. Colvin, why don't you start with that?
You have 1
Thank you.
minute left.
Thank you, Mr. Steiner. The duty to report, I think, is pretty straightforward. If you see abuse, you report it. There should be no ifs, ands, or buts. If somebody's concerned about their employment because of that or repercussions, they could go and they lose their job. There's certainly wrongful dismissal. They can go through the courts for that if need be. So agriculture, farmers, whether it's chickens, beef, dairy, it doesn't matter, pork, it's animal care, animal welfare, and there's a big difference between welfare and animal activism. And I think sometimes they get muddied up quite a bit. Welfare is paramount to farmers. And if somebody on my farm were to come and visit, even if it was just a guest, if you came out and said, boy, those calves look terrible, they're undernourished, there's something wrong, and you reported it.
Thank you very much. That concludes our time for this round. We'll now turn to the government side. Who would like to begin? Please raise your hand. From the government, MPP Smith, you may begin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is for Mr. Colvin, and it's following up a little bit on the false pretenses. I came from the software industry before I got into politics, and we carefully reviewed everybody's resumes. If somebody lied on their resume to make themselves look that much better so that they could be hired by us, and we found out that they were incompetent, we'd let them go. I've never experienced a situation, though, where somebody lied on their resume, did something to get hired simply because they wanted to take pictures or do something with us. I would suspect that all of our farmers do their due diligence. They check the resumes, and someone being brought in on false pretenses, to me, suggests that they did something wrong or something that they shouldn't have to falsify their qualifications to actually get hired when they had no interest in actually working. What we're trying to do here is deal with people, anyone who is a good employee who comes in to actually do their work. As you said, if they see something wrong, they should be reporting it. I think this legislation is supposed to be dealing with those who falsify their resumes and do things in a way so that they could get hired. Do you think that most farmers actually do look at what people have put on the resume and trust that they're not lying to them?
I think for the most part, sir, yes, they do. Farmers tend to be a very trusting group of people. And as we've seen in Ontario, there's a real shortage of labor, and even more so now. And as a result, I think farmers tend to give more leeway to let's get somebody in here working than they do necessarily to looking into the depth of the resume and the qualifications of the person. So it's a challenge. Farm labor has always been a challenge, and perhaps more so today than it has been in the past. So labor shortages create those variables, if you will. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you very much. And before I hand it over to one of my other colleagues, Mr. Benjamin, I want to thank the Chicken Farmers of Ontario as well. Tim Klompmaker, local chicken farmer in our area, made a huge donation to the Kawartha Food Share during COVID-19, and we greatly appreciate the support that the Chicken Farmers of Ontario has given to us.
You're quite welcome. Thank you very much, and I'll pass that along.
I'll turn it over to MPP Billy.
Thank you, MPP Smith. MPP Bailey, you may begin.
Madam Chair, I think I'm unmuted now.
Yes, you are.
All right, good. Thank you. And thank you to the presenters today from the agricultural community and Miss McCrimmon, I think it was. McKinnon. Anyway, one of my questions was, I found this very interesting all morning and this afternoon to hear both sides back and forth. I'd like to know a little bit more about, I guess I should give a shout out to Scott Helps from my area, who's well known, I think, in the chicken and egg business, very prominent down here, and does a great job for the chicken and egg farmers as well. I want to know a little bit more about the biosecurity, and I don't know whether Mr. Benjamin or Rob Dugans, maybe Mr. Dugans, you might have a better connection. If you could speak a little bit more about the biosecurity and the risks to food, I think maybe to get it on the record, about the risks to food if someone like someone that's unaware of the biosecurity issues was to go from one barn to another, or could that ruin the whole crop? Could you just explain the ramifications of biosecurity and the damage to those birds, or in this case? That question was to anyone there. That Mr. Benjamin?
I'd be happy to take that as well. And so the risk of contamination, not only from a biosecurity aspect, is great because transporting disease or anything else is for sure a concern. And there are many diseases that can be transported. So biosecurity is top of mind for all of our farmers. And it extends everywhere on particularly poultry farms. In terms of what the outcomes could be if biosecurity is breached, the outcomes can be very severe. And you have the risk of not only losing that crop, but having that disease spread to others as well. There's also the very real aspect of food safety, because I don't know what people would do, or when they illegally come onto my farm. I have no idea. My buildings are locked, so if they would come in, they would have to be let in by me. So for sure, that's a concern. It wouldn't happen. It shouldn't happen. So food safety is another element of this for sure. And whether it's avian influenza or something else that can be put into a farm can easily be transmitted, and it can come in on your boots. So, I mean, we change our footwear, we change our clothing, different coveralls. Everything is done on my farm and everyone's farm to prevent contamination, anything from the outside. So everything, you've got a controlled access to the farm, and then you've got restricted access. So you're taking off your boots, your clothes, etc., and then you're going into a restricted area. And if those are breached, the effects of that can be catastrophic.
Okay, I just a little follow-up. Just so I understand, not being a farmer myself, have raised in the rural community, but not a farmer. So would you have to assume, you or any of your colleagues, would you have to assume that if someone breached somehow, get into that barn, that could you determine if some of that crop, your chickens, are at risk, or do you have to assume that the whole barn's been contaminated? Is there a way you can tell, or do you have to go assume for the worst?
You have 1 minute left, MPP Bailey.
The whole barn's contaminated.
I guess the effects of that would be known fairly quickly. And so if you, let's take avian influenza. So if that was transmitted to my flock, the results would be catastrophic, and you would see it in 1 or 2 days after it occurred. And I mean, you've got an incubation time, and it would take time to incubate, etc. But the results would be almost immediate after that, and they would be horrific. And so you wouldn't need to do much studying to see whether or not there was an impact. It'd be there, and the birds would be dead.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This concludes this round of questions. We'll now turn to the official opposition. MPP Glover, would you like to begin? All right,
Sure.
You have 8 minutes.
Okay, that's great. You know, the deputations this morning and today have been very informative, and I thank you all for being here. So far, I've got a summary. I'm taking notes as we're doing this, and I've got a summary. It seems that everybody would agree on 3 different principles that we want to achieve with this legislation. One is we want to stop harassment and trespass on farm property, harassment of farmers and trespass on their property. We want to ensure animal welfare. And the third one that keeps coming up again and again is we need to protect the charter rights of the people of Ontario. And so the second point, the ensuring animal welfare. One of the challenges that's been brought forward by some of the deputants today is that there's a conflict of interest between the industry investigating their own, their complaints against themselves, especially since the industry players are the ones who are funding it and funding the organization. And there's, we've got lots of examples of third-party investigation and the benefits of having a third-party investigator. So I would ask then, perhaps Mr. Benjamin, you or Mr. Duggins, how would you respond to those issues? And I would just say, Mr. Benjamin, you've made an excellent case for broadband across the province today. Thank you.
Well, and so I'm going to defer that to Mr. Duggins then to answer, because obviously it isn't working as I had hoped. So, and I appreciate the comment. So
Mr.
I'm going to defer that to Rob.
Yeah. One thing you could do, Mr. Benjamin, is if you turn off your video and just have audio only. So don't disconnect from the chat, but there should be a button at the bottom left of your screen. Sorry, I'm just pausing the time here. If you disconnect the video, that might help with the lag, and we'll just have audio in that way. Can you just please let us know if you're still here? Yeah. Okay. So we're just gonna restart. Yep. You're still with us, so it's all good. As long as you can hear us, then it works. So I'm gonna restart the time here and get back to the NDP or official opposition.
And so I'm going to let Rob handle the answer to this one. That's fine. So thank you.
Thank you for the question. And let me see if I can challenge your assumption. And that is that as a regulator, a supply management leader and steward of, in this case for us, the chicken business, that we are at conflict or have a preferred position in this. I think as a regulator, we're looking to continually improve our business to ensure that our farmer members are aligned with practices and standards which are going to deliver a sustainable business, safe, high-quality chicken. And they work within a regulated system where they understand the requirements for animal health and welfare. We audit all of our farmers. We verify that they are meeting a number of national as well as provincial programs, which I mentioned earlier. So it's very much in the role as well as the ambition of the board to ensure that our farmers do the right things, that if there are any deviances from that, we're going to deal with it from a compliance and enforcement standpoint. And we're also going to continue to work towards what we call the next level of performance as we move into the decade of the 2020s.
Thank you very much for that. Let's see, the other thing that's been brought up is this could potentially, this bill, and there's been a few deputants already who said if this bill passes as is, there will be a charter challenge. And I know Mr. Schreiner already asked the question about, what will that do to confidence, public confidence in the food industry if this is being run through the courts and the media at the same time. The other question about the charter challenge is investigative journalism. So we've all seen the benefit of investigative journalism. We've seen it, in the long-term care homes. It wasn't investigative journalism, but the military went in there and they released this report. And finally, decades of abuse of seniors in our long-term care homes is being exposed. And hopefully, we've got the momentum to get it addressed. Investigative journalism is, the media is the fifth estate. It's a big part of a cornerstone of our democracy. This legislation, as is, chokes that off. It means that a journalist could not go in and say, I'm here to work on the farm or whatever, investigate, abuse and release a report. How do you respond to that criticism?
It's Rob here. If I can respond. One is I can't. In the reality of if there is a charter challenge, there's a charter challenge. We support this bill. We support our government. We support our farmer members. And if we're doing the right things, we'll let the courts will decide. But it's important, we think, that this bill in total has the right parameters. It has the right support of our agricultural community. With regards to the press, hopefully, and I can again only speak for Chicken Farmers of Ontario, we strongly believe in transparency. I'd encourage you to look to our website and or our other communications internally as well as externally. I think generally it's better if folks know more about our business, then they're going to see that the business is running well. So I take that forward as, again, the way in which we should be operating.
Thank you very much. The next question I have is, let's see, I guess actually Mr. Colvin, did you want to respond to that as well?
Thank you. Very briefly, confidence in the food industry will not be, I think, hurt because there's a charter challenge to a specific piece of legislation. Legislation gets challenged all the time. It doesn't mean that there's a breach of confidence in how our food is produced and the quality of our food. In terms of investigative journalists coming on to a farm or coming in to investigate, I think Mr. Duggins replied very well. We want
You
to
have
be
1 minute left.
We are not trying to hide anything. We want people to see what we do. And if we can improve, we want to improve because we want you to have confidence in what we do. Thank you.
Okay. Let's see, there's just 1 minute left. I will say, I appreciate what you're doing. I appreciate that you've come here today. Thank you. There was a question asked in the last round about, farm experience. I had the privilege of living and working on a farm for a while. My uncle owned a pig barn. I'm interested in both perspectives, and I do appreciate, this discussion because it really does point out the strengths and weaknesses of this bill. Ms. Mckinnon, I think there's probably 30 seconds left. Would you like to respond? Do we have any time left, Madam Chair?
You have 5 seconds.
Okay, we'll let it go at that. Thank you very much, everybody, for being here.
All right, thank you very much. That concludes time for the official opposition. We'll now turn to the government. You have 8 minutes. Who would like to begin? Please raise your hand. Do I see any hands raised on the government? Okay, MPP Pettipies, you may begin.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks everyone for coming today. That has been stated by all members of this committee. This has been very informative. A lot of information has crossed around, has been shared around, and certainly it's going to help us with this bill. I would also like to thank the chicken farmers for their service to the community. Mr. Benjamin is in my riding, and I see him from time to time in the local newspaper taking a load of chicken to a food bank. and things like that. So I really do appreciate what you guys do, and certainly what all farmers do in our areas in Ontario, whether it be chicken, hogs, beef, grain farmers, whoever, vegetable farmers. They do support their communities and certainly help out those who are less fortunate. I guess uninvited guests to your farm is a community, or is something that's been argued about all day here, and who should be allowed, who shouldn't be allowed, and it's a real concern to the farming community. Not only certainly with the spread of disease, which it has the potential of doing, and I think we all know how that can devastate a farm. Chicken farmers with avian flu went through that a few years ago, I think now, where it caught on. The hog farmers went through that with a strain of a virus that came through 2 or 3 years ago, and are still dealing with it. So disease can spread very quickly. As far as the investigative journalists and all this type of thing, the unfortunate thing about that is often it is done, and they don't take the precautions that are needed on some of these farms. And I'm talking about the biosecurity end of it. They probably won't, if they're sneaking around or try to get into a barn without being supervised by the owner, they likely don't have preventative equipment on, or clothing on them. They don't have clean rubber boots, or what I'm talking about. So there's always a danger of this type of thing when it happens. I do know that certainly the bill has its pros, has those who support it and those who don't. I think when you look at the whole picture, though, we are trying to provide, and we do provide, a safe product for our consumers. That's what we do as farmers, in all those in the rural Ontario. And it's more difficult when you're under stress, when you're under the stress of having people come onto your farms who aren't invited and who may cause serious harm to your farmer operation. I wonder, and Mr. Benjamins, if I could address, you could address this question. We talked about the mental health in rural Ontario, that it's, COVID-19 certainly hasn't helped. But I wonder, sir, in the community where you live, whether you've experienced or heard of those that are going through some real difficulties in the farming community.
Thanks for the question, Randy. Absolutely, I would say that for sure COVID-19 has added to the anxiety that our farmers face today, because the lack of certainty, the lack of clarity about the future, the lack of what's going to happen, the fact that you are social distancing, you're already on a farm, you're fairly isolated to begin with in many cases. So now that's taken away as well, so that anxiety is felt. I want to thank the government, particularly the Minister Hardeman, for some of the work that he's done around that. And I know that on our website, and we've got everything available to our farmers in a digital platform. Our website carries those links. And for sure, we're asking our farmers that if they feel that pressure, if they feel that need to talk, to come forward, that they do so. And so, as Rob mentioned earlier, we will be starting meetings. So we're going to be attempting and we're doing this for 7 nights in a row. We're going to be hosting regional meetings. And by all accounts, I haven't heard of any individuals come forward. But those are the types of things that we raise with our farmers, and we make sure that they're aware. So very much COVID-19 has added another level of anxiety and stress in the farming community, not just amongst our farmers, but just the uncertainty, whether you're a vegetable grower, whether you're planting asparagus, it doesn't matter what, if you're needing seasonal workers, all of those are stressors that have just been multiplied exponentially. And then you add to that the whole risk of people trespassing on your farm and unwanted guests. Yes, there's a lot, and I think this is the type of assurance that our farmers are looking for going forward. So thank you for the question.
Well, thank you for that response. I do know that we live in unprecedented times right now with this virus, and certainly some of the issues that our farming community has faced with other issues. Certainly, I'm sure you're aware that there are those commodities that are experiencing low prices and things like this that are having a difficult time. Fortunately, the crops went in pretty good this year, at least they did around us. I think most of them are planted. There might be a few beans to go in yet, but I think the spring has turned out fairly well. Hay crop's starting to come off. On the issue of inspections,
You have 1 minute left.
on the issue of inspections, I was pleased to hear how the chicken farmers of Ontario are doing their inspections and how they audit their inspections. To me, this is one of the best way or the best procedures that would certainly help our consumers understand that we do take you take your business seriously, and you want to have a product that gets to market safely and with good quality. And I know that some of the other commodity groups do the same thing, where they have auditors come out and make sure the premises are clean and they're doing things properly. And if they're not doing things properly, can at times have their operations suspended till they do things properly. So that gives the consumer a lot more.
Thank you very much. That concludes the time for the government. At this point, I'd like to thank our current presenters for joining us today. It's been a very informative discussion, and I'm sure that committee members will have a lot to take back and think upon. At this point, you may step down, and we'll have no further questions for you.